Welcome to the deep dive. We take stacks of information, research all sorts of stuff, and, well, we boil it down for you, trying to find the most important bits, the surprising things, maybe even the funny parts, to get you properly informed. Today, we're tackling a really crucial question. The whole world's buzzing about electric vehicles, this big shift. It's exciting stuff, absolutely. But it makes you wonder, doesn't it? The company's actually building the charging points, the essential infrastructure. Are they, are they actually doing well? Is it a profitable business? That's exactly what we're diving into today. The surprisingly, let's say, tricky economics of EV charging parks. We're going to break down a scenario from the Netherlands, which is, pretty far along with EVs.
Yeah, and the Netherlands is a great place to look at for this. It's a really good case study because they already have quite a bit of charging infrastructure built out. So it gives us a clearer picture, a more sort of established view of what profitability looks like or maybe doesn't look like in a real functioning market, not just theory.
Right, grounded in reality.
Yeah. So to figure this out, we've got some really interesting sources. There's a detailed profit and loss sheet, a P&L, for a sort of typical medium-sized charging park. And we're combining that with some internal findings, real-world observations too. The idea is to get past just the numbers on the page. We want to understand the key factors, what makes the numbers wobble, and yeah, those unexpected challenges that decide if these parks are actually, good businesses.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this. So first up, let's paint the picture. We're looking at this hypothetical, but like you said, realistic, medium-sized EV charging park in the Netherlands. What does that actually involve? What's in the park?
Okay, so for this model, we imagined a park with a practical mix. You've got 8 AC chargers, or so the slower sort of normal ones, 22 kilowatts each, good for when people are parked for a while. And then also 2 DC chargers, the fast ones at 100 kilowatts each. Just quickly, AC is your overnight or workplace charging, takes a few hours. DC is the rapid top-up, like on a long journey, much faster power delivery. Gotcha. And you mentioned fast chargers. I heard something about their sales maybe slowing down in the EU after subsidies were cut. Did that sort of background noise factor into thinking about the challenges here?
Oh, absolutely. That observation, that trend of maybe lower fast charger sales post-subsidy, it definitely frames some of our thinking. It hints at the financial hurdles. Now, looking at the revenue side, the absolute key metric is the utilization rate. Basically, how much time is a charger actually charging a car? For our park, we made an assumption, maybe slightly optimistic, but we think realistic. 15% average use for the AC chargers and about 10% for the DC ones. And that's assuming they're available 24/7.
Okay, 10 to 15%. Just to give some context, historically, public chargers in the Netherlands have often seen much lower rates, sometimes like 4 or 5%. And some studies suggest you need way higher utilization, maybe of over 15%. Some even say up to 60% for certain types to really make good money. So our scenario is hopeful, but maybe doable for a good spot.
Right, it's not wildly out there, but it's definitely not conservative. So based on those rates, we estimate the park delivers just over 400,000 kilowatt hours of energy per year, about 29,000 kilowatt hours per AC charger, 87,600 per DC, totaling up to 406,464 kilowatts for the whole park annually.
And how much do drivers pay? What are the prices like?
We used recent average prices for the Netherlands, so around 0.0 per kilowatt hours for AC charging, and quite a bit more, 0.80 per kilowatt hour for the DC fast charging. When you multiply that out, the total revenue just from selling the electricity comes to 255,792 a year.
Okay, nearly 256 Calais from charging. Is there anything else bringing money in?
Yeah, we added a small amount for other potential revenue. This could be, maybe some advertising on the site, maybe a small vending machine, something like that. We estimated that low, around 7,500 galor. So add that on, and the total revenue we're projecting is 263,292 per year.
Right, okay. So over €250,000 coming in. Now, the costs, this is usually where the story gets more complex, right? What are the big things eating into that revenue?
Indeed. This is where it gets tough. The single biggest cost, no surprise really, is buying the electricity in the first place. We assumed an average purchase price of €0.3 per kilowatt hours. Based on the total energy delivered, that's an annual cost of almost €122,000.
Wow. Okay, so nearly half the revenue just goes straight back out on electricity costs.
Exactly. It's a major component, and importantly, that price can fluctuate quite a bit, which is a risk. Then you've got all the other operational stuff. Maintenance and operations, O&M, that's routine checks, repairs if something breaks, software updates and licenses. We estimate about €3,000 per charger, so €30,000 for the park.
Okay.
Then the site lease or rent. This varies hugely depending on location, obviously, but we put in 20,000 euro as an estimate.
Yeah.
You also need some level of staffing or customer support, even if it's just remote help desk stuff for a park this size. Maybe 10,000 euro.
Makes sense.
Plus insurance property, liability, say 3,000 euro. And don't forget payment processing fees. Every time someone pays, there's a small percentage, maybe 2% of the charging revenue, so that's another 5,116 gone. And finally, just general overheads, admin costs, maybe legal, accounting, a little bit of marketing. We bundled that at 5,000.
Right. So those operational costs, they add up quite significantly even before we talk about actually building the thing. What about that initial investment, getting the park set up in the first place?
Yes, the initial investment, the CapEx, it's pretty substantial. Just the hardware itself.
Yeah.
The AC chargers might be around 4,000 each, so 32,000 for 8. But the DC fast chargers are much pricier, maybe 50,000 each, so that's 100,000 for the 2.
Okay, so that's 132,000 just for the boxes.
Exactly. But then comes installation. This is often the really big cost. You got electrical work, maybe digging trenches, civil engineering, and often you need upgrades to the local electricity grid connection, which can be very expensive. We estimated installation at 10,000 euro per AC charger, 80,000 total, and 25,000 per DC charger, 50,000 total.
Wow. So add that all up. Hardware plus installation.
You're looking at a total estimated CapEx of around 262,000 hours.
True. Okay.
And that big upfront cost needs to be accounted for over time, right? So we calculate depreciation. Assuming the assets last about 12 years, that works out to an annual depreciation cost of roughly 21,833. And one more thing, financing costs. Most projects won't pay that 262K entirely out of pocket. If, say, half of it is financed with a loan, maybe at 7% interest on average, that adds another 9,170 euros annual costs, non-operating costs.
Okay, that is a lot to factor in. So let's try and bring it all together. We had revenue just over 263K. Then we subtract the cost of electricity, all those operating costs, the depreciation, the financing costs. What does the bottom line look like?
After you tally all that up and then apply the corporate tax rate in the Netherlands, which is around 25%, the final net profit for this hypothetical park comes out to 27,926 euros.
Okay, and if you calculate the average return on that initial 262,000 investment, it comes out to 10.66%. Right, so 10.66% ROI. On the surface, you might look at that and think, okay, well, that's decent. You know, double-digit return. It's not terrible.
Yeah.
But, and this is the big but, isn't it? This is where it gets really interesting, because despite that number, the feeling is this isn't actually a great business in practice. Why is that? What's the dilemma?
That really is the heart of it. The numbers look okay, maybe even good on a spreadsheet, but the reality on the ground is tougher. The absolute main reason is that utilization rate. It is everything.
That 10-15% we assumed?
Exactly. Even a small increase, say getting it consistently up to 20%, would make a huge difference to the profit, but achieving that is hard. In the Netherlands, like many places, a lot of EV owners just charge at home overnight or maybe at work during the day. They don't need public charging that often. So those expensive public chargers sit idle a lot of the time.
Keeping utilization low.
Precisely. And besides utilization, there's the risk of electricity prices jumping up. At 0.30 we assumed. If that goes to 0.40, your profit margin gets squeezed hard, fast, and then there's competition. The Netherlands, as we said, has a lot of chargers that's very dense. So you can't just charge whatever you want. You're competing on price, which again limits your margins.
Okay, those are the big economic pressures. But you mentioned unexpected things too. I heard something truly wild that can hit operators, costs that you just wouldn't normally budget for.
Oh yeah, this one is kind of shocking actually. We found evidence of significant additional maintenance costs caused by cut-off charging cables.
Wait, what? People are stealing the cables, cutting them off the chargers?
Apparently so. I mean, maybe for the copper, it's bizarre. But the cost to replace just one of those thick, high-power DC charging cables can be around 2,500 euro.
2,500 euros for one cable. That's incredible.
It is. And think about the impact. Our park has 2 DC chargers, and typically they each have 2 cables. If someone comes along and cuts all 4 cables, that's 10,000 euro in replacement costs.
10,000 euros.
Yeah.
Wiped out, just like that.
Exactly. Remember that annual net profit we calculated? 27,926. One incident like that could literally eat up more than a third of your entire year's profit. Maybe even all of it if it happens more than once or other things go wrong.
Wow, that just blows my mind. That's a huge vulnerability. And speaking of costs, what about the cost for the driver? You mentioned DC is more expensive. How does that affect things?
Massively. It's a key part of the puzzle. For the driver, using a DC fast charger often means paying effectively twice the electricity cost compared to using a slower AC charger or compared to charging at home.
Right, zero point 0.8 euro versus 0.50 in our example, or even less at home?
Exactly. So what happens? Many EV users, quite rationally, will avoid the fast chargers purely for cost reasons. If they have the time, they'll seek out a cheaper AC charger or just wait till they get home. This makes it even harder to get that utilization rate up for the expensive DC chargers, the ones that cost €50,000 each to buy. They are the least used, proportionally.
So the most expensive assets are the hardest to make pay for themselves because people avoid using them due to the price. It's a bit of a catch-22.
Precisely. And if you zoom out, think about what this means for expanding the network. It strongly suggests that charging parks in less optimum sites are not economically viable. If you're not right on a major highway or in a super busy urban center, the numbers just won't work. Those slightly more remote or less busy locations, they'll likely only get chargers very slowly, if ever.
So for the average EV driver, what's the consequence of all this if you're trying to plan a trip or just rely on public charging?
Well, it means that charging anxiety is likely to stick around, especially for people living or traveling outside those prime areas. The infrastructure just won't be built out as fast or as evenly as people might hope. It also helps explain something else we've observed. Reports that many stations sold are still not on the grid and are standing idle. Companies might buy the hardware, maybe even install it, but then realize the economics in that specific spot are too tough, so they don't actually switch it on.
Wow, so ghost chargers, essentially.
Kind of, yeah. And one last point influencing usage.
Yeah.
We've seen that EVs are not popular amongst rental car companies and their business customers. That segment uses public charging quite a bit, so if they're not driving EVs, that's another chunk of potential demand that isn't materializing.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. We've gone through the numbers, the P&L for a typical Dutch park. On paper, maybe a 10% return, around 28,000 profit. But the reality is much tougher. The utilization rates are stubbornly low because of home charging. People avoid the expensive fast chargers. Competition is fierce. Electricity prices are risk. And then you have these crazy wild cards like people stealing 2,500 cables. It all adds up to a situation where, as you said, it's often not a very good business.
Exactly. It really shows how complicated this whole transition to EVs and the necessary infrastructure is, even in a place like the Netherlands that's relatively far ahead. It just underscores that having the information, like this P&L analysis, is one thing, but understanding the context, the sensitivities, the real-world factors, that's where the real value lies. Hopefully it encourages you, the listener, to think critically about what's really going on behind the scenes with infrastructure rollout.
Definitely. And it leaves us with a really interesting question to ponder, doesn't it? If just selling electricity at the charger is so economically challenging, what else can these charging car operators do? Given these hurdles, what kind of innovative strategies, maybe beyond just the charging itself, like you mentioned advertising, maybe cafes, other services, or perhaps really clever dynamic pricing? What will it take to make these ventures truly profitable, sustainable, and finally put that charging anxiety to rest for drivers everywhere? Lots to think about there. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive today. Keep exploring, keep asking questions. We'll catch you next time.